revolution without revolutionaries making sense of the Arab Spring. What I'm trying to say is this, that those activists were revolutionaries in the sense of engaging in revolutionary movement. In fact, they were quite impressive, very impressive, in terms of the tactics of mobilization. How to mobilize people, how to come to the street, and how to resist. They were pretty spectacular, in fact. Maidan Tahrir became a global place. It became a model for other movements that emerged in other places later on. Really, what I really mean is that these were revolution without revolutionary ideas. In terms of having a vision about change, about how to wrest power. That, to me, was quite lacking. People like Lenin or Trotsky, they had intellectual resource. They had, in some way, in their ideological package, an analysis of the state.
Not from socialism, but from Stalinism. That is from the irresponsible despotism of the bureaucracy over the people.
People like Che Guevara in Latin America.
Todo lo que hemos sido capaces de hacer hasta ahora, en igualdad de condiciones, desde ministro hasta cualquier otro cargo del gobierno.
Or Frantz Fanon in Africa, and Ali Shariatieh of Iran. They wrote a lot about, what capitalist state is, what dictatorship is, how is it possible to get rid of it, and so on. But it seems to me that in the case of the Arab Spring, as such, there wasn't an alternative vision to institutions against which they were actually rising up. So far, what we have spoken has been an analysis of revolution at the top in terms of changes in the institutions of the state, which is extremely significant. However, revolution has also another side, and that is the level of the grassroots. What revolution really means for the ordinary people. And I think it is here that in the Arab Spring, I believe that the grassroots, people like the urban poor or marginalized women and youth or social minorities, in some way radicalize these uprisings by their very practices, by their making claims in order to realize the kind of life that they wanted. But I have to add that many of those efforts were neutralized, unfortunately, by counter-revolution, whether domestic or regional. Revolutions start perhaps spontaneously and probably almost always surprises the revolutionary leaders. But having or not having an idea about the revolution has critical implications to the outcome, for the outcome when it actually happens. The revolutionary movements And the uprisings certainly did happen and can happen, even if political class activists may not think and imagine about the revolution. And it was for this reason that when what happened in the streets of Sidi Bouzid or in Tunis and later on in Tahrir Square and other places, so revolutionaries, or rather activists, had to improvise, had to come to terms with what they had perhaps never expected, what to do with this crowd, and what will happen the day after. They had to improvise. And it was very difficult. It was difficult. And I think there was a time when, even during the uprisings, there was an understanding that we probably are not ready for it. We needed to think about it. But then it was too late. As a consequence of this paradox, this reality, this paradoxical reality, the outcome became what I call a revolution, in the sense that you had a revolutionary movement, mobilization, that came to force the existing state to reform itself on behalf of the revolution, rather than, like in the previous times, the revolutionaries would actually form a provisional government, an alternative organ of power with some kind of hard power that they would gain, would compel the incumbent to abdicate, to go away, and then they would replace it, and they come to power and unleash a new kind of polity, new institutions, and so on and so forth. It is now important to actually reflect back to Tahrir moments, and it is very significant to document it and really think about it, and take it in some way as a historical, political, even moral resource for thinking about the future, in a sense that we had a tradition. Memory of revolution in Egypt or Tunisia really needs to be maintained. We should still be talking about it. It's very important to be talking about it, not to put it aside, that is okay, it's finished. No, treat it as unfinished project. I mean, history of a country like Egypt is not really short. There are different generations and so on that one should think about it. And so therefore I wouldn't terribly be depressed, despite the fact that the political condition right now is really very bad. I always say that in the big span of time, and in fact not very big span, even in our own lifetime, regimes will come and go, but really country, society remains. It's so important to work on society, and I think it is possible to work on society, because a strong society, a conscious society that values egalitarianism, inclusion, social justice, is able or will be able to condition and even acclimatize the states, can even correct them. So there's a lot of work to do.